Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and before we start this video, I want to pick your all's brain for a minute. You know, sometimes I forget what I'm going to talk about when I start the video, like for a brief moment, and it's kind of funny. I crack myself up, which I guess is kind of necessary because I guess I'm the only one who laughs at my jokes. Nobody else does. I'm not very funny. But in any event, I'm currently doing a whole setup. Like I'm redoing the setup in the house, the new house in Columbus, and I wanted to pick your all's brain, right? This is totally separate from Comics Explains for a whole different project, but I want to pick your all's brain. This first setup is the 2 foot by 2 foot soundproof panels, which are going to be consistent, and then the BenQ monitor, and then 2 PreSonus speakers. This next setup is the exact same thing, except with a Bose soundbar. So let me know which one you guys like, right? I mean, I'm not going to do both, but let me know which one you guys like. I'm kind of curious because I think it's cool. But in any event, what's this thing, right? This great big huge thing that was never explained in the MCU. I think it's the biggest thing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that was never explained, right? Like I think it's probably the biggest thing, and it's the most unique and interesting thing. Maybe not unique, but certainly the most interesting thing. We never found out what Scarlet Witch showed Bruce Banner in Avengers Age of Ultron. And I remember thinking about that, right? Like I tweeted this out maybe 3 weeks ago, and that tweet blew up, right? I got like 3,000 likes, and I was like, holy cow, like, I guess I'm not the only one who thought that was the case. But I was sitting there thinking about that, and I was like, we never got an explanation to that. And at the time, by the time Age of Ultron ended, I was like, okay, so maybe we'll get like a follow-up in Infinity War or Endgame. And then both those movies came and went, and we still never got an explanation. And maybe it was one of those things where it was like, well, it's up to you to figure it out. It's like, no, it's up to you to tell me is what it is. It's like directors that don't give you an ending to the movie. It's like, well, it's up to you to figure out how the movie ends, and it's your interpretation. No, it's your job to tell me because you're the filmmaker, and now I hate your movie because you didn't give me an ending. I'm looking at you, Coen brothers, with No Country for Old Men. So with this whole scenario, it's interesting, right? Because the real question is, what did Scarlet Witch show everyone? And it's kind of interesting because on the surface, it kind of shows fears, right? It shows like, you know, the things that everybody was afraid of, but I think it was really more negative emotions, right? Things that people were afraid of, or people experiencing the worst memories of their lives. When you look at Captain America, for example, Captain America 1 never got that final dance with Peggy Carter, and 2, the idea or the interpretation among most people who saw the movie was that basically Captain America cannot live without conflict. He has to have a war in order to have a purpose. When you look at Thor, it was the idea that Thor was basically going to lead he was going to lead Asgard to ruin, right? His actions, his power, whatever the case was going to lead to the death and destruction of everybody in Asgard. When you looked at Tony Stark, it was the death of his friends, right? He was going to get his friends killed. With Scarlet Witch, it was a little bit different, right? Scarlet Witch...
So, pretty sure Rob meant to say Scarlett Johansson instead of Scarlet Witch, but through the wonders of Adobe Premiere, I can fix this right up.
With Scarlett
Johansson,
it was a little bit different, right? Scarlett
Johansson.
I really felt that was more of like her reliving her worst experience, especially because of the fact that she talks to Bruce Banner about the fact that she can't have kids, and probably one of the most screwed up dialogues ever. And she's like, I'm a monster, you know? So like she hates that idea, and she was reliving the past. In that instance that we saw with Captain America, that didn't happen. With Tony Stark, it didn't happen, and with Thor, it didn't happen. With Scarlett
Johansson,
it did, right? So she just kind of relived her own past, and it was like the worst experience of her life. But my question is, what did Banner see, right? Because it was Bruce Banner who was shown, and then he's flipping out and losing his mind as the Incredible Hulk. And how do you get from A to B, right? How do you get from the point where he experiences something and then goes on a rampage after having experienced it? And in my mind, because whatever it was, it shook him to his core, right? Like it shook the absolute hell out of him. He was just like sitting on the thing and just shaking, you know, just kind of losing his mind. When I think about this, the first thought initially went to something like the death of Betty Ross, you know, Betty Ross dying or something along those lines. And then my thought process went to, okay, well, what if it's the opposite of what the Incredible Hulk prides himself on the most, right? Like what's the one thing the Hulk always says? Hulk's strongest there is, right? So like, you know, the idea that like the Hulk's not the strongest there is because he got absolutely thrashed by Thanos. So maybe that's what he sees. But I feel like neither of those are significant enough to scare the Hulk that bad, because he reacted the only way he could, which was by being angry. But I don't feel like either one of those really like made the Hulk scared, like terrified him that bad. It may be that he experienced something, he like relived a moment in his life, but if the experience he had in his life had screwed screwed him up that bad that it could push Banner into the state where he loses his mind and becomes the Incredible Hulk. There's only one thing that I can think of, and that's the abuse he suffered at the hands of Brian Banner. And given the fact that Scarlet Witch had kind of relived her own past, that stands to reason, right? It stands to reason that if Scarlet Witch sits down and says, okay, what I see is my time in the Red Room, basically Russia's version of the Weapon X program, essentially the program that made Wolverine. The Red Room was essentially Russia's version of that, just like their Winter Guard is Russia's version of the Avengers. But if she relived her own past, it makes sense that Bruce Banner would experience his own past too. And if the abuse he suffered at the hands of Brian Banner was so extreme that like it pushed him to that point, then it's basically just kind of like the Incredible Hulk lashing out in that way. But the Incredible Hulk in the comics was a reaction to Brian Banner, right? The idea of Bruce Banner becoming the Hulk was because of all the abuse he suffered and all that kind of stuff that basically manifested in the form of the Hulk when he was hit with all that gamma radiation. That was covered in Bill Mantlo and Peter David's run on the Incredible Hulk, which as far as I'm aware is still a major focal point of his character, especially considering Al Ewing's run on Immortal Hulk and the one below all manifesting as the father of Bruce, right? Manifesting as Brian Banner to scare the piss out of him. But the fact remains here, for me, I really kind of ally myself with somebody that a response that I saw on the website Quora, right? Because I kind of Googled this and I was like, well, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe somebody else has some really good answers out there. And I don't remember who it was that posted the response, and my editor can probably find it, but there was a response that said that what Bruce Banner saw was losing control. Like what he saw was basically the Incredible Hulk going on a rampage and tearing everything up. And this kind of makes sense, right? Because the Incredible Hulk, as he's appeared in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, hasn't appeared in the variety of ways that he has in the comics, right? In the comics, you have all different versions of the Incredible Hulk. You've got Devil Hulk, Joe Fixit Hulk, Savage Hulk, you've got like Mindless Hulk. You have all different versions of the Incredible Hulk. I always thought Savage and Mindless Hulk were really like two different iterations. Like Mindless Hulk was like the idea from the Onslaught saga, and then like Savage Hulk is like the old school Hulk, right? So I always saw it that way. I don't know, maybe people see it different, but the idea was if, looking at that, the Incredible Hulk as you see him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is usually for the most part just chill, right? He's lucid. So like he's the Hulk, but like he knows what's going on, right? Like when he absolutely thrashes Loki, he calls him like a puny god, right? So he's capable of speech and having conversations and so on and so forth. He's not just a mindless beast. The one that we saw that was rampaging, the rampaging Hulk, that's Savage Hulk, right? That's just like mindless Savage Hulk, right? Just going on a rampage and just tearing things up. But to kind of push him to that extreme, I think it was really like based on what we've seen, the Incredible Hulk and Bruce Banner's fear. The Hulk will lose control, right? Like something will happen, something will pop off, and the Hulk will go nuts. And I think that's what he saw. I think that what Bruce Banner saw was the Hulk persona, maybe the death of Betty Ross, something triggering it, and then him going on a rampage, essentially World War Hulk. But not the World War Hulk story from the comics, more of just kind of borrowing the name and then like in the most literal sense. Insofar as something happens, the Incredible Hulk goes nuts, and then like the Avengers try to calm him down, he ends up killing them all, and then like the world goes to war with the Hulk, and he's just like tearing everything up, he's killing innocent people, like he doesn't really care, right? Everything's just getting totally destroyed. And it's like the worst fear of Banner not being able to reel the Hulk in, and by extension, the worst fear of the Hulk, because he's not a bad guy, right? He's not a villain. And even in the comics, he's not, right? He just wants to be left the hell alone. The Hulk's got the most extreme case of social anxiety in the history of the world. I just want to be left alone. But nonetheless, I kind of think that's what it is, right? I think that's what it really boils down to, is the idea that what Bruce Banner saw, and I agree with this post on Quora, right? Because they were the ones, it's not my idea, they were the ones that had it. But I agree with the notion that like Bruce Banner just saw the Hulk losing control, and it scared the hell out of the Hulk to see what would happen if he lost control. And then he ends up doing that anyway, right? So it ends up taking Tony Stark to bring him down. But I think it's a cool idea, right? Because what it does is it sets the stage for things later on, right? Like what happens if the Hulk does lose control, right? If he just totally loses his mind. I mean, during the events of Thor Ragnarok, he was just having fun. It was him just kind of having a good time. But remove like the good time, and it's just like the Hulk rampaging and just tearing things up and ripping things apart. I think that's what it was. Like him killing the Avengers, and then the world goes to war with him, and he ends up basically killing the world. I think it would have been cool if it turned out to be like a kind of Hulk the end. So like basically the world gets destroyed, the Hulk's the only one left, or like he saw himself becoming Maestro. That would be awesome, right? Like, dude, if we got Maestro Hulk in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that would be legit. Dude, with like the beard and like the hair and just like 15 times stronger than the regular Hulk. Like, dude, during the Future Imperfect storyline, like Maestro broke the Hulk's neck. It was nuts. Like he literally like crippled the dude. Dude, he didn't even do it by a little bit either. Like he absolutely thrashed him, right? Like the Incredible Hulk goes toe to toe against Maestro Hulk and gets wrecked. But that's kind of the cool thing, right? Because Maestro Hulk was interesting, but he was also a dick. It was awesome. He was an amazing character. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think down in the comments section. I'm curious to know what your all's thoughts are. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.